Hello, I'm Rich MS. Today I am here to address these allegations against me that I created a John Wick-like VR game video and didn't include Superhot as one of the talking points. It is with a heavy heart that I accept these allegations against me are in fact correct, and I'm here today to rectify the issue.
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
So, after my first video about John Wick-like VR games started gaining some views, and as is typical with the internet, the comments section started to fill up with people that have an IQ at least 50 million times greater than mine, all wanting to explain why everything I did was wrong. I had comments ranging from people pointing out the fact that I'm bad at Onward, which to be fair is true, but besides the point, to this guy who wrote a comment longer than most university applications, yet still had the audacity to end it with, but that's just my opinion, to people who just straight up didn't watch the video. Anyway, as I read more comments, I came across a lot of people wondering why I included certain games and not others in the list. As I don't have an answer, I decided to make this part 2, following the same idea as the first video, but taking a look at a different selection of games, all recommended by people in the comments from the first video. So, the games we're going to be taking a look at today are Pavlov, Pistol Whip, Hard Bullet, Blood Trail, and by far the most requested, Super Hot. Now, if there's a game that you're expecting to be here but isn't on the list, then just bear in mind two things. First off, I am limited to games that you can play on a HTC Vive. And second, go check out part 1 of this video, as there's a good chance the game you're looking for could be on there if you haven't looked at it already. To rank the games, we will be looking at each game individually and giving it an overall score out of 10 on how well it portrays being like John Wick. So I now present What is the most John Wick-like game part 2 comments edition. So by far, the most hated game I chose in the last version of this video was Onward. All of the comments I read focused on 2 points for why this game is so hated in this context. First off, I'm shit at the game, something many of you didn't hesitate to point out, so anything that I tried to do was going to fail to begin with. And second, the game is far too slow paced to be a John Wick game anyway, so shouldn't have been included on the list based off that alone. In its place, quite a few people suggested Pavlov, with its better gunplay and snappier weapon handling and storage. Definitely something that at the time was one of my biggest issues with Onward. One person also said that I should choose Pavlov based off the fact that you can steal magazines and proceed to shoot someone in the head with a sawed-off shotgun. So let's put some of these points to the test. So, does Pavlov have good VR gunplay? Yes, 100% it does. To get myself started, as I hadn't played Pavlov for a while, I played some gun game, and every single weapon just worked. The weapons handle great and shoot so smooth.
Damn, that's smooth.
The reloading, from the mag ejecting to the bolt release, just works perfectly with no weird control schemes. Pavlov has the best VR gunplay, and that, I think, is a fact. Well, yeah, but not really. I don't think it's fair to say the game has the best weapon storage, as you don't actually spend a lot of time switching weapons, partly because reloading is so easy in this game it's actually often quicker to reload your main gun than switch to your sidearm. Actually getting hold of guns in this game is also really easy, as it uses the Counter-Strike style weapon wheel selector, which in my opinion is still one of the best ways any game has ever handled weapon selection. The weapon wheel selector translates pretty seamlessly into VR, so absolutely no complaints from me there. Yes, I can confirm this is possible and incredibly fun. 10 out of 10, would recommend. One quick final point for weapons. I know it's not the point, and I got quite a bit of heat for the amount of praise I gave for weapon attachments in the last version of this video, but loading guns up with all types of attachments like grips, sights and lasers and suppressors really does help with the cool factor, and it is here in abundance in Pavlov. So I am going to give it some extra credit for that. So now for some closing thoughts on Pavlov. This game surprised me, and in a very good way. I now see why it should have had Onward's place on the previous ranking, although unlike Onward, it would not have come last. I'm not going to pretend to be good enough at this game to be like John Wick in multiplayer, but loading up some bots and running around with pistols and your knife will have you wicking like it's nobody's business. For melee combat, you are unfortunately limited to only using a knife, but the knife itself is very fun to use and has some very good throwing mechanics, making it a genuinely viable option if you find yourself out of ammo in a close quarters pinch. I was wrong to not include Onward in the original version of this video. The gunplay is amazing, the movement is fluid, the weapon handling is smooth. Smooth. And the melee combat is genuinely viable. I would give this game a very solid 8 out of 10 John Wicks.
John is a man of focus, commitment, sheer will. Something you know very little about.
So Hard Bullet is a bit interesting. I don't think I've ever played a game that knows what it wants to be so bad. I swear to God, this game is obsessed. If it was a person, it would probably sleep with a John Wick body pillow. Now I get it, I do. I love John Wick just as much as the next person, and sure, have the weapon collection that you call the Wicked collection. But his car as well? Really? Wait a second. What's that?
I once saw him kill 3 men in a bar. With a pencil. With a fucking pencil.
I take it all back, best game ever. All joking aside though, this game is very fun. I actually first played this game quite a few weeks ago and wrote this video back then. I then went away for a few weeks and came back to find the game had a pretty large update that fixed most of my original issues. However, the game isn't quite perfect. So what are the issues? Well, these are going to sound quite nitpicky, but as far as I'm concerned, if it affects the gameplay, then it's something that's worth talking about. Issue 1. The melee combat is really quite clunky and can get a bit annoying. Now it's not bad and it's certainly good enough for the most part, but every now and then you are going to try and stab someone and it feels like nothing has happened. Luckily, the grabbing and blunt object hitting still work great, but just be careful when using a knife. The waiting on enemies is also a bit strange. Not as big of an issue, but if you're used to games like Blade and Sorcery where you can fling enemies across entire dimensions, it might take a little bit of getting used to. The second issue is a small issue with the gunplay, but one that affected me every time I played the game. For the life of me, I could not find a single button bolt release on any of the guns. This is definitely a bigger issue for pistols, where having to bring your hand over to rack the slide often results in a round being ejected from the chamber. It just kind of kept getting on my nerves. Now, there is an in-game workaround where you can change the reloading style to arcade, requiring you to just bring the gun to your hip to reload, but I find you lose some of that cool action flair that you get when you actually reload a gun, so personally, I just put up with the awkward reloading. With that said, Hard Bullet has a great selection of guns and an insanely large selection of hitty weapons to choose from. And it has one thing going for it that nothing on this list does nearly as well to the same extent. The game has truly brilliant and visceral environmental kills. And I'm not just talking about throwing enemies into walls or off cliffs. I'm talking about full-on launching people into meat grinders, dangling enemies from butcher hooks, dismembering unfortunate individuals with hydraulic presses, and electrocuting people with high voltage panels. All of these things are brilliant fun, but they lack that cool, calm, collected refinement that John has and have more of a Jigsaw meets Rambo vibe to them. Overall, this game still has some of the better VR gunplay out there, even if it is quite arcadey. And providing you don't get too caught up in the melee combat, you should have a great time playing as everyone's favourite pistol whipping hitman. 7 Johns out of 10. And speaking of pistol whipping, now, I'm going to be honest, when I first found this game, I originally watched the trailer and went, well, it's just Beat Saber with guns, which it basically is, but at the same time, in my opinion, is much more fun. Partly because I can't play Beat Saber for more than a second and a half without my heart feeling like it's about to explode. Whereas the shooting in Pistol Whip is a bit less exhausting compared to swinging your arms all over the place in Beat Saber. Anyway, it is very clear from the outset that this game is heavily inspired by John, as if you go through the weapon options, then you will quickly find the Baba Yaga collection, which of course is inspired by the films. So we're off to a good start, and the game only gets better when you get to the gameplay. It is one of the best VR games I have played for a while. At first, I was worried that hitting targets consistently would be difficult due to the speed the game moves at, but thankfully, the devs thought of this and put in just the right amount of aim assist. Not so much that it's immersion breaking, but enough to mean that you will hit most of your shots and make dual wielding a viable option. On the odd occasion that you do have to hit someone, that also feels pretty decent. Not that you can do anything too fancy, as it is an on-rails experience, but the enemies go down with a satisfying crash and screen effect. All of these gameplay things come together to create an amazing experience, and I haven't even spoken about the music yet. Each level has an amazing soundtrack and unique style that adds a surprising amount to the overall experience. It honestly reminded me a lot of the nightclub shootout scene from the first film and is just immense fun. To be honest, there isn't a whole lot more to say about this game, with the only downside being the fact it's an on-rails experience. But due to the unique style of the game and the brilliant gameplay, it still feels great and does an amazing job of making you feel like John Wick. If you have a VR headset, do yourself a favour and go and buy this game. 9.5 John Wicks out of 10 John Wicks every single day of the week. So playing Blood Trail has taught me two things. 1. Good haptic feedback makes a big difference when playing VR. And 2. Just because you've shot someone, it does not mean they are actually dead. Let's quickly cover the second point first. Unlike every game you have ever played, excluding Battlefield, Rainbow Six Siege, and every Battle Royale game ever made, enemies in this game can and will get back up after you've shot and downed them to try and kill you.
You can't kill me!
So I very quickly found myself getting into the habit of trying to finish enemies I had downed by unloading an entire magazine directly into their face as I killed them or as I walked past them. Now for the first point second. This is the only VR shooter I can ever remember playing that has no haptic feedback in the controllers for shooting and weapon interactions. I'm playing with Valve's index controllers, so this may be a device specific issue, but controllers vibrating when a gun is shooting is something that the N64 could handle with GoldenEye back in 1997. It's something that you get used to relatively quickly, but it's also something that I notice for the first 5 minutes every time I play this game after playing literally any other shooter. And it just kind of gets on my nerves a little bit. Now, as for the game making you feel like John Wick, aside from the vibration issues, the gunplay is solid with a decent selection of weapons to choose from and satisfying sounds. The weapon handling is snappy and reloads are great with a single button interaction for mag ejection and manual forward bolt releases to keep the reloads clean and fast. The only other real issue with the gunplay is that certain maps in the game are very dark, like Armor 3 without night vision levels of dark. For me, that can make the aiming really quite difficult, to the extent that it actually makes the game quite unpleasant to play. Luckily, it's easily avoidable by just choosing daytime raids and indoor survival maps.
Are you blind? You can't see me!
In my opinion, the indoor survival maps are the best for making you feel like John Wick anyway, as the combat is closer and more personal, allowing for more and better melee kill opportunities. Using melee weapons and fists is viable, and like with the guns, there is plenty to choose from to beat the shit out of people with. I did have a few issues with the stabbing physics where I would go to stab someone and literally nothing happened. But aside from that, using a knife is as visceral, brutal and enjoyable as ever. All in all, Blood Trail makes a decent John Wick game. Definitely not the best, but it does provide something a bit more unique than just being in an arena with enemies being thrown at you.
Right up Main Street.
Although if you want, that is still an option that you have. Overall, 7 John Wicks out of 10 is what we're going to give this game. Now it's time for a super hot take. The game is great and still has one of the best slow motion mechanics ever developed for VR, let alone gaming as a whole. But the game is not good for being John Wick. Now it's important to realise that this is not directly related to the gameplay in the sense that the gunplay, knifing, punching and slow motion mechanics are all still amazing. But the game is just far too linear. All of the combat encounters are scripted, and after replaying them a few times each, you feel like you could do them blind. The issue is only compounded by the fact that you can't move much outside of the pre-designated standing locations. If you have a pretty decently sized play area, then you can move around that as much as you would like. But if your VR area is standing only or a smaller room scale one, then your options unfortunately are very limited. Now I know what some people could be thinking. Rich, it's no more linear than Pistol Whip. And true, 100% right. But unlike Pistol Whip, which suffers from the same issue, Super Hot lacks the pure accessibility and replay value that that game has. For me, Pistol Whip's music and visual aesthetic also make the game more enjoyable as a John Wick experience. Now I would still recommend Super Hot to anyone who is looking for a great and unique VR experience. But let's be honest, it's not like anyone watching this video needed me to tell them that Super Hot is a good game. It's basically the 11th commandment at this point. I'm just saying that in my opinion, there are better options if you want to experience the best John Wick-like combat. So for me, Super Hot, you only get 5 John Wicks out of 10. Not because you're a bad game, but because you're too linear and you don't have enough replay value.
Super hot. Super.
So here we are. Turns out the internet is actually pretty good at finding John Wick games. A hell of a lot better than I was, that's for sure. Now that's not to say that I think any of these games can quite knock Bonework off its top spot. However, I'm going to give 2 special mentions for this video. First off, Pavlov. This was a big surprise for me. Before working on this video, I hadn't played this game in quite a few years as I just never really got into it. Probably because I was shit and only ever tried to play online and then got my ass handed to me. But coming back to it for this video has been amazing fun and a very good John Wick experience. But unless you're this guy, I would recommend sticking to bots for a bit. Second special mention has got to be Pistol Whip. Just about everything in this game is brilliant. The guns, the feel, the music, the art style, just everything. Normally, if I'm playing a game for a review, I would uninstall it afterwards to save space. But this game has 100% earned a spot on my PC, and I can see myself coming back to it time and time again, just like I have with Beat Saber over the years. So that's it. Thank you to each and every one of you who have made it to the end of this video. If you are actually looking for the best John Wick game, I hope you found this video somewhat useful. If not, be sure to check out the first version of this video where we looked at a different selection of games. If you enjoyed the video, please consider dropping a like and subscribing to the channel. I'm still trying to grow it, and feel free to chat down in the comments about your favourite John Wick game or even more John Wick games that you think I should check out. And I will catch people in the next video.